That's inherently true. Yeah, do they have more people? Yes. But again, there's one very unique thing about the United States that no matter how much people dislike it, there is a well-regulated civilian militia. It's not organized, but people are armed. And yes, obviously, an M4 isn't going to hold up to a bunch of Chinese aircraft flying over us and bombing us and things like that. However, I don't think that it would necessarily get to that point. And we have very powerful allies. I think people forget that too. Is you know, look at Australia. Like people
People
forget how much.
they write them off, right?
Well, and the thing is, like Australia hates the Chinese more than we do right
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
So
yeah.
there are a lot of countries that do. Again, we have other allies that are large in numbers, but they're not necessarily
Committed is
potentially the most
right.
the or was, one of our bigger allies when it came to the Chinese conflict. Um, Now, do they have the manpower? Sure. Do they have the logistical power? That's that is the question when it comes to a place like India. But we have these other allies, and people are just acting like it's China versus America, and it's China versus NATO. And again, China has allies maybe in the Middle East, maybe in North Korea, maybe in Russia, but Russia has proven that they are this legitimate, that they were this superpower
And they're
that
not.
was
They're
getting
not.
bullied by, has not been able to overtake the Ukraine. So I I think that this was kind of a let's see what they're going to do. And again, I haven't done enough research. I've just seen some like Daily Mail kind of clickbaity articles that have just said that China will retaliate to us shooting down the balloon.
By
And it's
doing
like, what are they gonna do? Like shoot down our hot air balloon convention, that we
right.
have?
And
Like,
this is this is where I another article in which I read too was this whole Taiwan question as well. When Nancy Pelosi had made her statement last year about how we will stand with Taiwan, well, you know what comes in with Taiwan is the production of all these chips, these computer chips, which is necessary for the guidance systems on these missiles, which is necessary for a lot of major electronic things. Um, and which is, and you mentioned Australia earlier. This is part of the reason why Australia is like, you guys go in there, we're gonna come in and kick your butt. We're not even gonna play around. And to me, the atmosphere within the Chinese government right now is one of let's flex our muscles, and like you said, let's flex our muscles and see what they do. You know, when you look back in history, this isn't the first time that the Chinese have tried this. The Chinese, of course, you mentioned India. China and India do not have a good relationship at all. Back in the 60s, there
no.
was a border dispute. Actually, it was right during smack dab during the same time as the Cuban Missile Crisis. And that region has always been highly disputed. The Chinese, the Chinese have often, and after the Cuban Missile Crisis was over, the Chinese referred to Russia as a paper tiger because they didn't really do anything. We didn't, in Chinese eyes, the Russians didn't do anything. They should have, doubled down and, okay, let's launch a couple of nukes. What frightens me about this whole thing, Sean, is this that there are still those people in control in China who believe in world domination. I think that there's still those hardline communists who still believe in a worldwide communist revolution. And if we would just be able just to flex our muscles a little bit and show that we should be taken seriously, you know, that's the thing that frightens me, And of course, Donald Trump's statement was, when I was president, the Chinese respected us. You can say whatever you want to about that, but this thing is far from over. I like I said, I am going to be interested to see what China, like you said, what China's response is going to be. More than likely, I think it's going to be more economic sanctions against each other. We'll probably throw up a ton against them. They'll throw up a ton against us. and we'll see. I mean, it'll basically. I don't see anything as far as war. I you know, but to me, it's a whole new. I mean, it's a whole new realm. I mean, I want to get more of your perspective on this with this Russia Ukraine thing. Do you think that there are? I mean, we wouldn't know, but I mean, do you think that's part of the game plan? Is that China gets involved with Russia? Do you see that as part of
I
a
think maybe I don't know. It's tough because here's the thing: you have to if you're China, you have to think that it's worth it. You have to think that Russia's a worthwhile um, ally, and if they would have steamrolled the Ukraine and taken it, maybe. But
mm-hmm,
but I mean, Russia, this the mighty Russian power is struggling to do what they've tasked themselves to do in the Ukraine. And yes, they're receiving, aid from foreign governments, but it's not even like they're tapping these other foreign governments dry of their resources.
mm-mm.
Like there were a lot of people that were complaining about tanks that we were sending over to, you
The
know,
yeah,
the Ukraine. But here's the thing, again, like I said, those were Marine tanks, and we're shifting the dynamic of how we do warfare. Here's the thing: if you want to complain about anything, complain about the billions and billions of dollars we left sitting in Afghanistan.
yeah,
Complain about that.
yeah.
If you want to talk about, they quite literally, that shift made the Taliban one of the most well armed militaries in the world.
We set them up
If
nicely.
you
Yeah,
break it down, I mean, we quite literally set them up to become the one of the best well equipped militaries in the world. Now, there's a couple takes on that. Like, okay, well, what do they do with it? Now, there's the could they sell that stuff to China? Maybe. Could they sell it to someone like Russia? Maybe. Logistically, how would they accomplish that? I don't know. Um,
well, that they don't have the. To me, I don't think they have the infrastructure to pull that off.
Precisely. So that's where it begs the question. It's like, okay, great, you guys have this military, but if we're not touching the sand anymore, then who cares? You know what I'm saying? Like who really cares? Yes, it sucks that the Taliban is going to have control of that area for pretty much ever.
Right.
Um, but in the same token, if they're not leaving it, if they're not able to produce an economy to continue to, keep that stuff, keep it in good shape. I mean,
Well,
not going to twist it.
yeah,
It's military
right.
equipment. It's
Do they
kind of
have the?
shitty.
They don't have the That's exactly right. They don't have the mechanics. They don't have the engineers. They don't have the people who will take care of
And
that.
and and mind you, they could get those things, but in the same token, like, okay, if things break, is there economy to replace it? And then if you just keep replacing the same MRAP, if you keep replacing the same Humvee over and over and over and over again, like yes, that will tap out. And if you can't replace them with new ones, then what's the point? We look at now, like in the military, we have these new vehicles by Oshkosh that are going to replace, I believe, what vehicle is it of ours that they're going to replace? I don't know why I'm brain farting. I was just in one the other day. Uh, I'm literally having a brain fart. But a long story short, they're these vehicles that withstand IEDs a lot better and mortar attacks better. I mean they're pretty legit. They look like these. If you've ever played the Halo series, they
Mhm.
kind of look like warthogs from Halo. I mean, but more badass even if that's possible. They're cool. Um,
Is it? Are you talking about
but
the
but
JLTV
yeah, I want to say
joint
that, but I don't know
joint
why
light
I'm.
joint light tactical vehicle?
Yes, those are it, but I forget what are. Hold on, I'm gonna look it up now. Mm-mm-mm.
It says they're replacing the military with the Humvee is being replaced with the joint.
Yeah, I guess so. They're kind of replacing the Humvees, but it's
Hmm.
it's another one.
Hmm.
Uh,
So we're trying, and that's the other thing when we're trying to stay. And I bring this up. You know, we watched. Have you got to watch the new Top Gun Maverick?
I haven't yet. I
And I want
haven't
to
yet.
tell you something. I am an anti Tom Cruise fan, but this film was so well done. And they never really in the and I won't give anything away, but the target enemy, the target site that they're mentioning, They never say it's Russian. They never say it's Chinese. But it could be, when you look at where they're flying, and how they're flying in and where they're flying in. I mean, and to me, I think art imitates life. Okay, because all these next, and I mean, everybody is trying. You talk about this vehicle replacing the Humvee. We're trying to step up all of these next generation vehicles. And in the movie, and I've watched a ton of stuff about comparing the Top Gun movie to real life. Is there a Mach 10 plane? Yes, there are Mach 10. They are currently working on Mach 10 planes, which to me, 10 times the speed of sound is just, that's mind blowing in and of itself. But every country, I believe, is always trying to get the edge on the other guy, especially, because when it used to be the United States in the 80s, the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, when China or when Russia and the United States, when the USSR and the United States were the two superpowers, we were the two legitimate superpowers. The reason, and part of the reason why the Soviet Union fell, we had the economy that we could pump money into our military machine. The Soviets did not. The Soviets could not keep up with what we were developing. By the late 80s, their top of the line was the MiG-29. The MiG-29 was the plane, was the go-to. And at the time, that would have been the F-14 Tomcats. Okay, so the F-14 Tomcats, and now we're up. I believe the current series I think we're on an F-22 right now is the series that we're in right now. And it's becoming obvious when you look at, and we brought this point up earlier, when you looked at why isn't Russia just flat out annihilating the Ukraine? They're still using Cold War relics. They don't have pilots who are trained in air-to-air combat. They don't have pilots who are trained on low-level, knockout missions. And so now they're out of the picture. Enter in the Chinese. Okay, so, and we actually don't know. Maybe we have missed somehow. Maybe when you're flying these balloons up at 120,000 feet, commercial air traffic travels somewhere in the 30 to 40,000, 30 to 40,000 feet up in the air. Okay, your military planes can go anywhere. It depends, like you were talking about like what we have out at Scott Air Force Base. I mean, I'm sure there's planes that can top the stratosphere. Okay, that can see these things. I don't know how high F-22s can go, but we have, is it possible that something like these balloons? I mean, I think they're using balloons instead of, somebody was saying, well, why aren't they using spy satellites? I was reading that article the other day too. Why aren't they using spy satellites? I mean, the Chinese have that technology. They have satellites in space. They have the tech up there. And from some of the editorial pieces that I was reading, I mean, these balloons are slower and they're not going to raise a lot of attention. And so when these balloons were spotted, NASA was actually brought in on, I mean, we had some of our, I don't know what the proper term is. They're not telescopes, but basically like our satellites they use for Google Earth and all that other stuff that NASA controls. Okay, let's focus in, and that's where we started getting some of our early intel was from NASA, what they could shoot pictures of from their satellites, and we found out, hey, this isn't a weather balloon. And so there's a lot of interesting angles, and we're going to get a lot of info over the next couple of days. I was reading this morning that it's Navy, Coast Guard. They've got these heavy salvage units that are in there that usually go in like after to deal with munitions and stuff like that. But right now they've said the debris field is about 7 miles across. So it's not, it could have been a lot larger, I think, if we did it overland. So, in my opinion, this was probably the right move to make, although everybody's like, well, why don't we shoot it down? Why don't we shoot it down? And at the end of the day, you have to realize, folks, that we elected, bigger heads in the room at a higher pay grade level to take care of these problems. So, the American public is going to have their opinion, be it as it may, but, I think that this is going to see what plays out here in the next couple of weeks. I mean, they're moving the stuff right now. They're moving it to Quantico, which is where I believe CIA, FBI are headquartered at. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this. But yeah, what's some other thoughts that you have about this, Sean?
No, I'm with you. I feel like if it was going to be shot down, if it should have been shot down, it should have been in Montana. And the only reason why I say Montana is because if there was going to be a spot where there was land where if this thing was going to fall, I mean, I get that too. It's when people are like, why did they shoot it down as a balloon? It's not just a balloon. All right. Like it's also, you got to think of this could have been something like the Hindenburg coming down kind of thing. Like it could have hurt people, could have landed on people. Like, if you ever had a rock that fell on your head from 100 feet, the shit hurts. Okay. Like, this isn't just going to like nosy on down and fall down. Again, I wish, I wish there would have been, better monitoring of it. In a sense of like, yeah, we kind of knew where it was and we were able to track its pattern, but in the same token, like, again, this is an absolute worst case scenario, and I'm sure that there was probably shit that could have told us. But hypothetically, like, what if this thing somehow, one way or another, did have weapons attached to it? Something like that. Now, obviously, that wouldn't have happened. It's not like the Chinese government was that stupid. But in the same token, like we kind of let this creep into our airspace pretty casually, and I think that's just kind of would we have found out about it? Would we have been told about it if people wouldn't have seen it? Like if it wasn't kind of that obvious, if it would have been a cloudier season. We've collected the debris, is from my understanding of what there was to be collected after it was shot down, and so we'll learn. I would like to see what exactly China's retaliation of this is going to be. And why they weren't, more honest with it from the get-go, or at least said, hey, this is going to happen, not leave it for America to kind of figure out what was going on. If it was, just a weather balloon.
And I do want to bring up one of my, you may remember me showing this to you in class. I showed it to all my classes the day that it happened. Do you remember the guy, Felix Baumgartner, the guy who jumped from the Red Bull Stratos? It was 100. He was 100. So he was 100. He was actually at 124,000 feet. So he was a little, but it's the world record for the highest free fall. Okay, and I was just looking up some stats over when he did that jump. This was back in 2012. And now Felix Baumgartner in all of his gear was just a little bit tad under 300 or tad over 300 pounds. Okay, so at 124,000 feet, he reached Mach 1.25 free falling. Okay, so bring in something that weighs much more. Think about what that would do. I mean, I think shooting this down over the ocean, I mean, you're obviously not falling into a mattress or onto a cushion, but if I had the choice of shooting something down over water or over land, and God knows if this, I would love, they're not going to release it. They're not going to release it, but I would love to know at what speed this thing got up to when it was falling. I mean, obviously faster than Mach 1.25. A free fall at 140,000 pounds from 100,000 feet. Okay. I guarantee you that thing was moving. And I've seen a couple Twitter videos of from guys in South Carolina from a couple different angles. And I mean, of course, you can see the the plane and shooting the missile and shooting that all off and it falling. But I mean, it was at the time. I mean, from the time they saw it shot to the time you lost it was three. Like I think the longest video I saw was 3 minutes, and that I was trying to see how long it took him to fall that. It took him close to, what was it, 7 minutes? Yeah. It took him close to 7 minutes to fall that far. So just
through that.
Yeah. So this is going to be an interesting one to watch. I would like to see where this is going to go, what this is going to look like, what the government's going to, how things are going to look. But anyway, one other thing I want to point out before we're done for the evening. And I just caught this stat, and this will be a good discussion point for another podcast, but I wanted to drop this stat before we left the air tonight, that Quinnipiac, or whatever that the survey group is, the nonpartisan survey group, said 59% of American people do not want to see Trump and Biden in 2024. And in another part of that survey, 49% of registered Republicans who were surveyed said they don't want to see Donald Trump run in 24. So I was like, oh my gosh. But that was great stuff. It was great stuff. But anyway, man, it's good having you back this week, Sean. I was glad to see you this week. Our buddy Travis, we didn't mention, Travis is actually, I believe he's on the road this week. I believe is where Travis is at this week. So, but
yeah, he's on the road, and no, of course, it's always good to be back. I know things kind of get crazy, and I know next week I won't be able to. Yeah, I won't be able to do if we're on next Monday. Thankfully, my parents are actually in town for a couple of days.
Yeah.
And I'll have to take them back to the airport. But if we, we'll
too bad we couldn't have a Murdaugh.
One of these days we'll have to have Murdaugh on.
The Murdaugh guest host.
Show, and we'll have to bring him on. And I'm not sure if you guys can handle that much of monotone.
Well, you don't
two monotone, boring whites.
Let me just say it this way: you don't want my dad on here. You do not want that. That's disaster.
Well, we should come up. We should have a dad's episode one of these days and bring the ringer, and they can all just tell us how stupid we are.
Yeah.
Anyway. It'll be good for us. But no, yeah. Again, to all of our listeners, thank you all so much. And everyone that listened live tonight, and then everyone that's going to listen as we continue to do these things. I am really excited. We will do some feelers out to the ground. Maybe if we do decide to do a live broadcast all together in one location, maybe we can potentially find a spot where actually we can have some people come watch us live. Yep. If that sounds like anything that our listeners would be interested in doing. Yep. So you guys can boo us off stage and let us know how much we suck in person. So either way, it's fine with us. So but again,
take one more look at it before we go, Sean. But take one more look, take it all in. Just take all.
You're right. I am actually bulimic, so I did need to throw up one more time tonight. So that actually works out perfectly. Good, I see that V is celebrating in a pool of diarrhea that just happens to be blood red. So no. Again, always great. And again, to all our listeners, thank you all so much. We look forward to talking with you guys, with the three of us, next week.
See you.